Okay, here we go. Let's hope it actually works this time. Let me know if it does. Well, thank God it worked this time. I guess I might as well tell everybody who's watching this in the future why I'm probably going to look a little flustered at the beginning of this. And I shared a screenshot in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord as proof. But when I hit on the original link for this, go live for the live stream, it showed it going live. It looked like it was live on my side, and then just no one acted like it was live. And I'd have never seen that before on YouTube. But I got to tell you, no matter how much effort that I put into making sure everything works on my end, YouTube always finds a way to screw you over if you're a creator. So that's really cool. That all that time I spent working on the audio, and then they're like, "Guess what? Won't even start." Um, but anyways, yeah, I'm assuming I sound good, right? The audio's fine. I've tested this like a million times. I'm losing my mind over why sometimes YouTube audio stability over live streams just isn't good, but I assume so because I don't see anyone freaking out right now. But okay, there we go. Welcome to the end of month, end of August in this case, live stream or loose ends, where we tie up all those loose ends, but the things that we have been discussing for the past 3 to 5 weeks. And of course, I usually start with some sort of leak that I didn't think was really worth saving for a broken silicon or its own video. They're sometimes smaller, but honestly, sometimes they're larger leaks, like me confirming Zen 7 is targeting Zen 6 is targeting 7 GHz. I always mess that up. All right, let me see then though, because I do want to get to those leaks quickly, especially so that the future people watching this aren't like, why won't he get to what I clicked on the video for? All right. So again, you can ask questions. People who join the Patreon could submit questions ahead of time. People who are in the live stream, maybe you missed that, or you just aren't part of the Patreon for whatever reason. Send the tipped questions now, and then me and my mods organize those and I answer them throughout. So you'll want to submit them as soon as possible, though, so that I don't miss getting to them. And if I end the stream. So there's that as well. But anyways, let me get to the first leak here and stop my yammering. All right. RX 9070 GRE 16 GB. I'm going to be very direct about everything I know. I don't have a leak slide. I don't really think it's necessary for this kind of more, I don't know if I say niche, but like late launching, probably not the main focus of the RDNA 4 lineup graphics card. But I do think it will be pretty interesting based on the specs I have. And I do have full specs for the 9070 GRE 16 GB. So let's go through them. First things first. Yes, it has 16 GB of RAM, despite being called GRE. For those who don't know, there's already a 9070 GRE that's launched in like China or something. I've actually seen it in OEM or pre-builts in the US on Newegg as well today when I was looking around for it. So that version has 12 gigabytes and 48 compute units. This new version that they're going to launch across the world globally is going to have 16 gigabytes instead of 12 gigabytes, which means it has the full 256-bit bus of Navi 48. However, it does still just have 48 compute units, and it will have 18.5 gigabit per second memory. This is something I covered in my recent 50 Super Leak. Why would this use slower memory? Is it just to save cost? No, it is to save cost, but it's also so that if there's a shortage of 20 gigabit per second memory, the fastest GDDR6 you can reasonably get, that AIBs can use much more easier to source slightly slower memory for this. So this 9070 GRE 16 GB with the slightly slower memory, with 48 compute units, this should easily capture any of the bad yields of Navi 48. There's not that many bad yields in the first place because it's, because of how good the TSMC 4 nanometer process are. But now let me get to what makes this interesting, though. Again, recapping, 16 gigabytes, 48 compute units, so less than the 9070, but not that much less. I am told that this thing will have 2.7 to 2.9 gigahertz clocks and possibly a 230 watt TDP, meaning a higher TDP than the 9070 with higher clocks than the 9070, but less compute units. I think this will be like 10% weaker, maybe. And if you overclock it, it will probably be pretty close. So, yeah, I mean, depending on what they decide to price it at, which I'm told they're planning 450 to $500 for the price, I think this might be the card to get if it's actually at MSRP. And this to me signals that AMD is preparing to get a bit more aggressive next to the super launch. I don't know if they'll do a price drop on the 9070 XT and the 9070. But I do know that if this launches for 450 with barely less performance than the 9070, it wouldn't surprise me if this is actually also almost a de facto replacement for the 9070 as well. I don't know. It's interesting. It seems like the way the 9070 series is going to go is the best price performance will be the 9070 GRE, which will be like, 20% weaker than a 9070 XT. And then you'll have the 9070, which will be a little faster than the 9070 GRE for a little more, but also be the most efficient option in case you care about that. And the 9070 XT will be the direct, of course, 5070 18 gigabyte super competitor. So there you go. Again, let me put down a timestamp for this for people that watch this in the future. Again, recapping the specs of the 9070 GRE one more time, or the new version. 16 gigabytes of RAM, 256-bit bus, 48 compute units, 2.7 to 2.9 gigahertz clocks. So again, almost as faster actually than the 9070 non-GRE. Maybe even a higher TDP, 230 watt TDP over the 220 watt TDP in the 9070 non-GRE. So it should get pretty close to performance. The only real downside, besides the compute units, is the slower memory. And that's probably the main reason I'm told this will perform like maybe 10% worse than the 9070. Although I bet some averages find it only 5% weaker. So yeah, this just seems like a way for AMD to capture the worst yields, use the cheaper memory, and get you something that's nearly 9070 performance, but at 5060 Ti pricing. Again, $450 to $500 for the price, which means it should go head to head with the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, and it should launch this quarter. In fact, I'm told it should possibly launch at the end of this month or October, next to the 5070 Super release date. So I think that's really exciting. Let me now move on to another leak, actually, because this is something I still get asked about, and I get why. I'm not like complaining here. I get asked about FSR 4 coming to RDNA 3, basically every piece of content I put out. In fact, I would say no matter what I do a video on, whether it's about an Xbox, a PlayStation, an Intel CPU, there will always be a few comments that say, when is FSR 4 coming to RDNA 3? And also, where's the 9080 XT? Now, I covered that a little bit in the last video I put out. I'll have some questions about it. I'll answer. But when it comes to FSR 4 on RDNA 3, it is coming. It hasn't been canceled. I was told that the SDK is just taking a ton of resources. And what I would infer is that the priority for AMD has been to improve FSR 4, prepare FSR 4 Redstone for deployment, and port FSR 4 to PS5 Pro. So they are putting that as a priority over getting it working on older graphics cards. But the good news is that they are kind of finishing up some of the other work, it sounds like. And so they are putting more people on the like RDNA 3 port team of FSR 4 right now. And it's just a lot of work. They're basically having to rewrite the code for FSR 4. And that takes time. And so they're going to do it though, because they want PS5 Pro to get it, which has basically RDNA 3.75, if you will. And they definitely want their RDNA 3 cards. And again, I think most importantly, all of their Strix Halo laptops, their Hawkpoint mini PCs, their Strix and Phoenix laptops that are out there, they want all of those to eventually have FSR 4 support. And so it's going to come, but it's probably going to come around quarter 1 or at the end of quarter 4. So that's what it is. It's just taking a lot of work. They prioritized other stuff until now. And late quarter 4 or quarter 1 is when RDNA 3 and RDNA 3.5 and PS5 Pro should get FSR 4. Now, the only thing I will say is there is a little bit of bad news on this one. And that is that I do not believe it's coming to RDNA 2. Now, obviously, we've seen some hacked versions of FSR 4 kind of running on RDNA 2 in a janky way. So it sounds like they could plausibly port it to RDNA 2 in a nerfed way if they wanted to. I was directly told that they're not doing that, or at least there's no resources going towards that right now. So if it ever came to RDNA 2, it'd probably be a very long time from now and not perform remotely as well as you'd probably want. wanted to. And so, there you go. Again, FSR 4 is coming to RDNA 3, 3.5, PS5 Pro, but don't expect it until the end of this quarter or early next quarter. And it's not coming to RDNA 2. All right. Now, I have a ton of questions, by the way, about the RTX 50 Super Series and the 9080 XT submitted by patrons. But before I get to that, as always, an ad from a sponsor, this time from ZipRecruiter. Finding great candidates to hire can be as time consuming as trying to find an Nvidia laptop that actually has enough graphics memory. You're always waiting for the right candidates to apply, sorting through resumes, trying to get in touch with potential candidates, and finding candidates that are good, but also actively looking for a new job at the same time that you find that they're qualified. Well, the future of hiring looks much brighter than the future of NVIDIA laptop VRAM, and that's because ZipRecruiter's latest tools and features help speed up finding the right people for your roles, so you save valuable time. And now you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/work. And you really should, because with ZipRecruiter's new advances, you can easily find and connect with qualified candidates in minutes and see if a candidate you're really interested in, well, if you see that, you can unlock their contact info instantly. Plus, with over 320,000 new resumes being added to ZipRecruiter monthly, you can be sure that if you use ZipRecruiter, you're using the platform with the most potential hires so you can fill your roles sooner. So support Moore's Law is dead by using ZipRecruiter and save time hiring. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And if you go to ZipRecruiter.com/work right now, you can try it for free. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/work. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right. There's the ad out of the way. Please do click that link in the description, though, for ZipRecruiter to show support for the channel, even if you don't necessarily need to use it, though. Let's see. Although you should check it out for a bit, too. That helps the channel and helps my sponsor. Okay. So let's get to some RTX 50 Super Series stuff. I don't see any questions yet. I do see a tip here from JS. Thank you for the tip. All right. So as you all know, I put out a big RTX 50 Super Series leak on Wednesday evening. It went through everything, the full specs, release date, likely pricing, a few surprises, like maybe the 5080 Super will get blazing fast memory and be pushed hard enough to seemingly compete with another high-end AMD card. We'll have to see if that actually pans out that way, though. And also that they are end-of-lifing the 5080 non-super and the 5070 Ti non-super, meaning that, yeah, they're just basically getting rid of most of their 16GB cards. Another interesting thing that I'm excited about, I wish the 5070 was being discontinued to just get rid of that 12GB card. I mean, 12GB is low end at this point. But I have seen reports out there that Nvidia is supposedly reducing supply of the 8GB 5060 and 5060 Ti as well. So I don't know. I guess they'll keep the 5070 around because there's always people silly enough to buy a 12GB 70 card for some reason. I think it's a complete mistake to do that personally, but that's why they keep making it. But besides the 5070 12GB, it seems like Nvidia is cementing their new VRAM lineup as, yeah, low supply of an 8GB 5060 card at the bottom, but then a 16GB 5060 Ti for like $400-ish eventually, a probably $600 18GB 5070 Super, $800 5070 Ti Super, and $1,000 5080 Super 24GB. So that's exciting, I think. And again, I think that tells you Nvidia knows they really do have a problem here with perception of how much VRAM they have not being enough. And when I say perception, I mean, I would say the correct interpretation of the situation, not really just perception. And then also, I think that they think AMD has a full RDNA 4 refresh coming. But anyways, to the questions here. Dark Side of the Force writes in and says, do you think the 50 series refresh would be out in retail in any significant numbers when it launches? Like, do you think the 5080 Super is likely to be scalped and smuggled due to VRAM? Well, first of all, whether they supply a bunch of the 5080 Super 24GB or not, yes, it will be scalped, smuggled due to VRAM, because that's where we live in right now with AI. So, I mean, yeah, no matter what, that's going to happen. In fact, I would actually have a lot of concern about the 5080 Super getting 24GB of RAM and the 5070 Ti Super as well, of course, because that's going to open it up to a lot of people that couldn't justify getting a 4090 for AI development. And now they see this, and it's about 4090 performance for half the price of what a 4090 used to cost with the same amount of RAM. So, yeah, that's going to happen. But I don't know if it's supply so much as demand will be high for 24 GB cards. Now, the next question, would AMD respond with a bigger refresh on more models, perhaps? I think so. I've heard multiple times that AMD's got an RDNA for refresh coming. The most recent stuff I've heard from my sources is that to retail partners and like AIB partners, stay tuned soon, you know. So where I take that to mean is I think AMD probably has new Zen 5 refresh CPUs and RDNA 4 refresh graphics cards coming at CES. I don't know that for a fact. That's my interpretation of what's going on. And I also just think that's most likely what AMD would do. We've seen in recent earnings calls Lisa Su directly say that even though graphics cards don't have as good of margins as their CPUs do, when they release them around the same time, or even just when they release graphics cards in general, a lot of people apparently tend to buy an AMD graphics card and then buy an AMD CPU system with it. And so if they're talking about that in earnings, I think that directly tells you AMD is probably going to decide to launch new CPUs and GPUs at the same time whenever they can. And that makes sense, you know. Also, the 9070 XT is still like dominating sales. Again, I covered this in my 50 Super League. Like, I've never seen this before where it's like the top 6 to 8 or whatever it is graphics cards on Newegg being sold are Radeon. I don't think I've ever seen that in my life, like ever. So that means they're selling very well and they're not rushed. They probably want to get rid of their stock over the Christmas season. You know, they'll launch, like I've said, the 9070 GRE 16GB to compete. But besides that, I think that's mostly what they're going to be doing there. And so yeah, that's why I think Nvidia is also doing a refresh as soon as possible, because AMD is beating them in do-it-yourself sales. If you look at actual retail data, not, I think, frankly, disproven sales information from some other sources out there. Just talk to retailers like I do the groundwork, do the journalistic work, talk to supply and retail people, and they will all tell you Radeon is selling very well right now and do it yourself. Again, laptop sales, it's not what I'm talking about. AI GPU sales, I don't know, but I do know that AMD has record Radeon sales reported in their earnings, and Newegg has like the top 6 and 7 or whatever it is GPU sold as Radeon, which tells you Nvidia thinks there's a problem, and that is why they are launching these cards. They have a problem, and AMD's probably got stronger cards coming. Kiln God writes in and says, RTX 50 Super Spec seem unreal. Does AMD have covert products in the work? I don't know how covert it is if Nvidia is already responding to it. They seem to know. So, but in terms of 50 Super Spec seeming unreal, I don't think they seem ridiculous at all. I mean, the 5070 Super has like what, 4% more CUDA cores than the 5070. They're not even discontinuing the 5070, so they'll still use the bad yields for that. And then they also have more memory more easily available on the market right now that they will use for the 5080 Super and 5070 Ti Super. And they're not even increasing the CUDA core count of the 5070 Ti. They're just increasing the RAM and then changing the TDP to something 15% higher and probably allowing it to clock faster. So they're going to add another 10% or so to the core, and then they're actually giving you enough memory and maybe a lot faster memory with the 5080 Super. I don't think these specs seem ridiculous at all. I just think people's expectations are very low at this point because I mean, the 4080 Super really kind of underperformed expectations for performance, in my opinion. I really expected more than like the 2% boost in performance they gave that thing. Let me see here. Let me now put in a timestamp for this question here. Well, it's basically the same thing. I'll just put this here. RDNA 4 refresh super. Okay, so TechnoLads writes in and asks, in your earlier video, you implied they may do a full RDNA 4 refresh. If we do get a Navi 44, so that'd be the 9060 XT, GDDR7 variant, would it have a 12 gigabyte model? You also said similar to Polaris, they call it 10,000 series. And they came up with an entirely new naming scheme. All right, there's a lot of questions there, TechnoLads. First of all, the naming. I think any RDNA 4 cards that come out will probably be called part of the same generation as the 9000 series for two reasons. You avoid having to deal with the renaming of the lineup until you have a new architecture, number one. Number two, Nvidia and AMD don't rebrand as often as they used to. You know what I mean? That used to be a thing where, like, what's some good examples? Uh, like, well, Nvidia would rebrand everything from Fermi to Kepler cards into their lineups all the time, in the low end, like the GT 520, 620s type of stuff. AMD would rebrand things all the time, like 480 to 580. They both don't really do that anymore. And I think it's because they realized you don't need to. Like, they were doing that because they thought OEMs insisted you needed a new series. Like, actually, if people want to blast from the past, Google HD 8970 and you will find a generation of GCN graphics cards that was like 1% faster or whatever than the 7000 series that they launched for a year just because they thought they needed a new series for OEMs. That didn't help AMD take any market share. I mean, all that rebranding did nothing. I think what you can see, and Nvidia basically, I would argue, started this maybe with Maxwell or Pascal. You have a big lineup, a big launch, a bunch of fanfare and marketing, and you let that cook for a couple of years. And if you need to launch new products, it's part of the same lineup, because the second you start rebranding cards over and over and over again, is especially if you rebrand them into smaller numbers, like what they used to do, where like AMD had an HD 7850 that then became, I believe, the 270, or no, the 265, and then the 360. And it's like, these are entirely different names. If someone wanted a 7850, they don't even know what they're buying anymore in the future. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to call this a new series, Technolads. I think what you would see is a 9075, a 9065, instead of 9060, 9070, and then a 9080 and 9090, maybe, if there's a new die up there with GDDR7. But additionally, Techno, you said Navi 44 GDDR7 variants. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think that's necessary. I think if AMD does a refresh of RDNA 4, at most there will be one new variant of Navi 48 with GDDR7 that isn't Navi 48. It would have to be a different die, which I am aware of other code names, by the way, that AMD has. It's Navi, like, uh, for something else. I'm not going to say what it is here yet. But I do literally know there's other dies for RDNA 4 that haven't come out yet, and one of them looks like a name that could be a GDDR7 variant, but that's it. I don't think they refresh 48 and 44, or should I say they refresh 44 with some GDDR7 variant, because you don't need to. Why would you bother? No, I think what they would do is you'd have hopefully some 9080 XT that's basically like a new stepping of Navi 48. That's the die in the 9070. And then it's a new stepping that clocks higher, whether that's just because they can bin it higher with the new voltage curve, or because they use Navi 4, TSMC N4X or N3X, whatever. I will say, though, my 9070 XT in Battlefield 6 when I was playing was running at 3.4 to 3.5 gigahertz with a very tame overclock. I have to say, if I can run my 9070 XT at 3.4 gigahertz, it wouldn't surprise me if a new stepping with a different voltage curve and binning could get you to 3.7 gigahertz. And then they just add GDDR7 again, so they can have a faster card for gamers, but then also so that they can give it more RAM as an AI card. So that's what I think they would do there. And then I think they would just overclock the 9070 XT to 10% and call it the 975. They'd overclock the 9060 XT to like 3.3 gigahertz and call it the 9065. And that's all you'd have to do, because frankly, the 5070 Super, which is what any 9075 would compete with, the 5070 Super is still going to be probably 10% weaker, I think, at least, than the 9070 XT. So if you make a 9070 10% faster than where it is now, it wins by 20% against a 5070 Super. I mean, and so even if they're the same price and Nvidia has 2 gigabytes more RAM, I think AMD's fine just overclocking it and just launching that variant, and then maybe price dropping the 9070 XT to like 550, 9070 to 500 or something. I don't really think they need to do some giant thing for the lineup besides, again, one new card at the top and then just refreshes with faster clocks along the stack. At least that's what I expect. I don't know for sure, I suppose, but I'm going to be honest. If I was AMD, I wouldn't want to use GDDR7 unless I have to, and they don't have to get good performance out of the 9060 XT. All right. Clean Sweep writes in and says, why didn't any GPU manufacturer try using some form of LPDDR to provide cheap and good enough VRAM before? I remember Nvidia slapping DDR4 on GPUs every now and then, but everyone said those sucked back in the day. So I don't remember if that was just because they cheaped out on the amount of RAM or the actual RAM choice was bad. Well, yeah, that's why. Let me put a timestamp for this as well. LPDDR, why now? Because that's actually a good question. So, for those who don't know, again, check out the Zen 6 Medusa slash AT4, AT3 graphics card leak that's on the channel. Again, I think the algorithm kind of buried that video. I think that's maybe the biggest leak of the year out of this channel. And yet it's getting half the views of like the PlayStation or the new Nvidia Super leak. So check out that Zen 6 Medusa leak on the channel. Please do me a favor, everybody, if you haven't. But anyways, the reason I think it's so big is in that video, I talk about how AMD's next generation of APUs shares the GPU tile as a memory controller tile, right? The memory controller is on the graphics tile. And therefore, you can take that same tile you're going to use in laptops and an APU, and you can just add like an HDMI out tile. And then, there you go. You got a dedicated graphics card. So that's cool to share yields between laptop and desktop and the next gen Xbox, by the way. But in addition to that, a really interesting wrinkle is because it's a laptop tile, it uses LPDDR5X or LPDDR6, depending on which one AMD wants to use. And what that means is AMD can give you like hundreds of gigabytes of RAM on a low end graphics card now. Now, I say low end, keep in mind that when I call whatever the successor to the 9060 XT is low end, it's low end for the next generation. It still has 48 compute units. So 50% more than what's in the 9060 XT with a much faster architecture. That means that it's still probably going to get to around 9070 performance, maybe with 24, 32 gigs of RAM at the low end. Although I'd say 16 to 24, depending on what AMD chooses. And that's very, very exciting. All right. But now we get to the core of the question. Now that I've explained to everybody who missed it, like, why did using RAM, like laptop memory, suck before, and why does it not suck now, and why is AMD doing this now? So before it sucked because the RAM sucked. I'm just being honest. Like, let's talk about memory speeds here, okay, everybody? The RAM in the 9070 XT is 20 gigabit per second. The RAM in most GDDR7 cards right now is 28. The RAM in LPDDR6, that goes up to like 14 gigabit per second or more, I believe, once that comes out. So if you think about it, that's faster than early GDDR6. For those who don't remember, Turing, like 2060 and some, especially laptop GDDR6 graphics cards, they had 10 gigabit per second, 12 gigabit per second memory. The PS5 base has 14 gigabit per second. That means that LPDDR6 can actually get to faster speeds than GDDR6 in the PS5. No, it's not as fast as what the 9070 XT, what the 9070 GRE will have, but it's still close enough that you're getting that speed. And LPDDR5X by them should get to around 11 gigabit per second. Again, that'd be very slow GDDR6 by today's standards, but you're still kind of at the GDDR6 tier. All right. So now let's go back to GDDR5 era, where there were these crappy versions of graphics cards that had DDR4, not even DDR5. They could have had DDR5 and been okay, but they mostly would have DDR3 or DDR4. Guys, we're talking 8,000 megahertz in GDDR5, and even slow RAM would have been like, I think at launch it was 4,000, 3,500. DDR3 was like what, 1,600 megahertz? We're talking an eighth the speed sometimes here, maybe a fourth, a third the speed of GDDR5. That's why those graphics cards sucked, because you would cap your you'd cut your bandwidth down to a fourth or an eighth of what you would have gotten. It was bad, really bad. And sometimes they would do it to save $20 on like a $100 graphics card. But they would also sell well, kind of as a, I would argue, anti-consumer way, because they used DDR3 or DDR4 like 10 years ago on these low-end budget versions of graphics cards, budget versions of an already budget card. They might have 4 gigabytes of RAM, and 10 years ago 4 gigabytes of RAM was kind of a lot. I guess maybe not 10, 12 years ago was kind of a lot. And so people would go, whoa, an $80 graphics card with 4 gigabytes of RAM, I better get this, and not know that they have the bandwidth of like, I don't know, I almost said a Game Boy, but it's obviously more than a Game Boy. It's like just a really small amount of bandwidth. And outside of really niche scenarios where you needed that for like CAD work, it was bad. Um, Today, though, if you go from GDDR6 to LPDDR5X, you're only cutting your bandwidth by like a third to half. And that's enough over a 256-bit bus in AT4, even a 128-bit bus with AT4. So that's why, before laptop RAM just was too slow. Now it's not. And also back then we didn't have infinity cache or like massive pools of L2 cache and graphics cards like you do with Lovelace or Blackwell. So that's another reason why the raw bandwidth doesn't matter as much. Now, a third thing. If we were to say the three reasons why now we're using laptop memory for graphics cards and we didn't before. The first reason was it sucked back then. And the second reason is we have more cache in our graphics card, so it doesn't need as much bandwidth. The third reason that you would also do this is capacity just matters more now. I mean, 15 years ago, a gigabyte of RAM was enough. Crap, I think like Mass Effect 1 on PC, I remember playing that. I think it required a quarter or half a gigabyte of RAM. RAM requirements have just gone up where capacity matters more than speed a lot of the times in the low end now. Actually, a fourth reason, too, now even low-end graphics cards are like $300 or more. Guys, low-end graphics cards back in the day were $60. So, like, if you could save $10 going from GDDR5 to DDR3 or 4, you're 20% cheaper maybe. And if someone's sorting on Amazon for a graphics card back in the day, they might see a 6670 GDDR5 for $80, and then there might be a DDR4 or DDR3 version, I guess probably DDR3 version for like $50 or $40, and then you'd go, "Oh, well, I'm buying this because it would actually look appreciably cheaper." You're not saving remotely, the cost savings were worth it then, and it's not as big of a difference now. Like now you might save, it's more about the capacity. Sorry, my brain almost stopped working for some reason there. But so I hope that makes sense. Again, the reasons, I think it's an interesting question. Why now? Why LPDDR now? First reason is the RAM was too slow back then, and so that's why everyone panned it, and that's why you saw no one really do that anymore for a while, because it was just too slow. But now it won't be slow in 2027, so that's really cool. Number two, as a reason here, we actually need capacity more than we did before. Number three, we have the cash to make up for it. And number four, well, anyways, there's also the sharing with APUs and stuff. So I think I recapped it enough before my brain just melts down for some reason over this one. But I hope that makes sense, because there are very real reasons you would do this now, whereas you wouldn't do this before. Okay. Corey Cast writes in and says, "Hey, Tom, what do you think are the true market share for GPUs for AMD versus Nvidia? I find it very hard to believe the Steam hardware survey." Yeah, the Steam hardware survey is incredibly flawed. I wouldn't rely on that. Uh, but yeah, so honestly, I just think there's a lot of misconceptions about GPU market share in general. Like, I think that you see people making a lot of weird arguments. You'll see people go, "Oh, well, I'm talking about dedicated graphics sales, not APUs." Why the hell can't we count an APU? They're not weak anymore. I mean, you literally have AMD APUs faster than like half of NVIDIA's lineup, or, so not half, but a substantial amount of NVIDIA's lineup. Like, you would rather have Strix Halo than a 3050, or even probably than anything above, probably even a 4070. You've got to get to like 5070 Ti levels before you're really substantially better due to running out of RAM. So I think if you look at, graphics market share, it's silly to look at only dedicated at this point, because everything since Phoenix has been able to run AAA games with AMD, and a lot of people just game on that. That's worth counting. It's nuanced, because would I say you should count Raptor Lake integrated? I don't know. Probably not half of the time, but you should definitely count Lunar Lake as market share. Lunar Lake's pretty good at gaming. So there's that in this one bucket. Another bucket we've extensively covered on this channel. Gamers Nexus has covered it too. Reuters has done official reports on this stuff. a substantial amount of Nvidia's gaming market share is just crap being smuggled into China for AI or bought for AI in the US as well. So we don't really know how many gamers are using the Nvidia graphics cards for gaming. I mean, we just don't know, unfortunately. But what we do know is if you go to Newegg, we actually see AMD cards selling well. So, it's just nuance. It's like you can talk about laptops where Nvidia dominates dedicated graphics sales, but also AMD's APUs are used for gaming all the time in laptops in a way they weren't before. Is Nvidia dominating OEM sales? Absolutely. And that's what AMD needs to fix. But do it yourself is its own thing. And Nvidia would want to release a super series if they see AMD dominating do-it-yourself graphics sales. Think about it, guys, because that kind of looks like Zen 1. Zen 1 was pretty hard to get in a laptop. Zen Plus was very hard. Zen 2 became a little easier. 3 a little easier. Really wasn't until Zen 4 that it was easy to get AMD outside of do-it-yourself. Like, let's just be honest. And if you're Nvidia and you're watching AMD dominate do-it-yourself sales, you might go, this looks like Zen 1. We don't want this to turn into a Zen 2 next generation. So we need to compete with this. So that's basically my thoughts on like graphics market share. And like, all I know is AMD's reporting record Radeon sales, record Radeon shipments, and they're dominating do-it-yourself sales on Newegg. Sounds like they're taking some market share to me, but I don't know how you can manipulate Steam Hardware Survey, and who knows how many of the total graphics card shipments are even going to gamers from Nvidia. All we know is Nvidia thinks they need to respond, and if you talk to any retailer or person in logistics or supply, they say AMD is selling better than before. So that is what I rely on. Take me as one of the data points. If you want to go to John Petty Research, who has had to take back some of their data before when they reported completely off ARC sales, and I've talked to people who cannot replicate their data, or you want to go to Mind Factory sales from Tech Epiphany, but that's just one retailer. Those are due data points. I'm a data point. I'm telling you what I hear in retail is AMD is selling better than before. So, and I would think you should go to actual retail sales, actual logistics, than just rely on flawed surveys. And I find that funny too, because it's like, haven't we already talked about in ad nauseum how polling is flawed lately? And yet for some reason, we're just going to take some of it as gospel. I don't know. It seems very inconsistent to me, the way some people talk about some forms of polling, but not others. All right. Dylan K writes in and says, with how extensive NVIDIA's engineering team is, why do you, let me say one more thing though. I am not saying that AMD has more market share than Nvidia. It's not what I'm saying. Just need to clarify that, because I think people often miss that nuance as well, where I'm saying, no, AMD's picking up steam and taking market share in like South Korea, Japan, apparently, and America and Europe right now. That doesn't mean I think globally they're at 80% market share. I think Nvidia still has most of the market. I just don't think Nvidia has 96% of the market. I think that's absurd. And it doesn't bear out in any data that I've seen. Literally any, from any retailer in any region. I don't know where that's coming from. Unless there's just that many Nvidia cards being smuggled into China, but that's not for gamers then. Anyways, back to this here. Dylan K writes in and asks, with how extensive Nvidia's engineering team is, why do you think that they don't fully understand the extent of how bad the driver overhead issue is? Yeah, so I thought about this one. I looked forward to answering this question. I believe that Nvidia knows there is a graphics CPU overhead issue. They just don't, they underestimate how bad it is. And I think this is very similar to what's going on with their VRAM problems. So if you would have asked me 2 years ago, when I was already railing about 8 gigabytes of RAM, I mean, I remember some big YouTubers saying more than 8 gigabytes is marketing when the 3070 launched. And then when I reviewed the 3070, and I liked the 3070, I'd say I gave it a very good review, and I used the 3070 for a couple of years as my main GPU. So I'm not hating on the 3070. Overall, I liked that graphics card at the time, actually. I mean, at launch, I was able to find multiple games that I couldn't play in 4K because it ran out of VRAM, even without maximum textures turned on. And some of those games like Resident Evil 2 Remake were a couple years old. So I was sitting there going, so 2-3-year-old games are running out of VRAM already in 4K. This card's more than powerful enough to run 4K if it had enough RAM. That's a major issue. So even someone like me that has been at the forefront of complaining about how much VRAM Nvidia often gives us, If you were to ask me 2 years ago, like when I sold my 5070 or 3070, do you think in 2025 8 GB graphics cards are already going to be struggling to do 1080p medium in some games? I would have gone, oh, I don't know about that, but that's what we're finding. And so I think, I was blown away by some of Hardware Unboxed recent testing. I expected the VRAM issue to keep getting worse, but I think Nvidia is kind of like what I'm saying, but even more so under like being surprised. Like Nvidia knew they have an 8 GB problem for a while. Why do you think they're so sensitive in their marketing around the 4060 Ti, where they're like GDDR6X or whatever alleviates the VRAM bottleneck when it clearly doesn't? Why would Nvidia spend time in their marketing materials that they send to reviewers, spend paragraphs talking about why 8 GB is fine? It's because they knew they had a problem all the way back in the 4000 series. They knew. I just don't think they knew that we were going to get to 2025 and all of a sudden tons of AAA games would have trouble even in 1080p, which they do, even if you don't see your frame rates going down. Oftentimes they're loading low textures or, they're loading, Xbox One S textures or whatever you want to call them, like not even Xbox Series S. So I just think Nvidia underestimated how quickly this would become a major problem. And again, I quote this all the time. I remember, and I think it was 2022, 23, talking to an NVIDIA source about this, just kind of for fun, picking his brain, not really trying to get any specific leak, and going, you understand this is going to be like a massive problem if you give the 5060 8 GB, let alone the 4060. And this person's like, well, unfortunately, we can't really do anything about it. And I'm like, you understand, I might not even run games, right? And I don't know. Nvidia was just completely asleep at the wheel. Hardware Unboxed, watched the recent Broken Silicon, said the same thing. He said he would bring up this VRAM issue to people at Nvidia and say, why are you giving gamers only 8 GB of RAM in 2025? And Steve said, Steve said they looked at him and went, oh, we sell 16 GB cards, just buy the 5080. I mean, how out to lunch do you have to be to give an answer like that? So I don't know. I just think Nvidia's been asleep at the wheel. When it comes to a lot of problems, and the question wasn't even about VRAM, whether it's about VRAM or their CPU overhead issue. They know it's a problem. They spend time addressing it. And I think they just didn't realize Battlefield 6 was going to launch. And the 9070 XT is going to be better than a 4090. They just didn't see it coming, which it is, by the way. If you ask me what graphics card could you get for Battlefield 6, especially now that they've announced it's going to have FSR 4 support, I would say a 9070 XT. Unless you want to do 8K 60. That's when you would get a 5090. But anything below that, and there will be a lot of maps where the 5080 is not better. So it's basically 5090 for 8K or 9070 XT for anything else. It is pretty bad. I will have a cut down yield video coming out on Sunday, by the way. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel right now, by the way, where I have a conversation with Steve that me and my editor have highly edited and focused with graphics, where me and Steve talking about the CPU overhead issue. So look for that to drop Sunday morning, because the further research that was done for that video that will drop shocked me even more. I shared it with the fans actually in the Moore's Law Z Discord, which you can get access to if you join us on Patreon. I found some crazy examples. Like I found, and I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. Like I found that in Rainbow Six Siege X, according to the data I saw, unless you have a 9800 X3D, you have a weaker card than a 9070 XT. Doesn't matter what you're using. Like if you are below 4K, I believe. No, even in 4K it was, because you're already at such high frame rates. So I think there's a lot of people with NVIDIA graphics cards right now that don't realize they aren't gaming as fast as they think they are relative to a different card they could have bought. Like if in Rainbow Six Siege X, you need a 9800 X3D for the 5080 to beat a 9070. That's what it showed, by the way, in the chart, not 9070 XT. You need a 9800 X3D for the 5080 to beat the 9070 non-XT in Rainbow Six Siege X. I mean, that's like all gamers, right? Like I'm not talking about if you're someone with like a 9900K or you're still gaming on Zen 2. I'm saying if you have a 5800 X3D, if you have a Raptor Lake i5, your 5080 is weaker than a 9070 non-XT in a lot of scenarios in Rainbow Six Siege. Also, I found here's another crazy example: Hogwarts Legacy. I'll show this in the video. And Hogwarts Legacy with 4K on, I mean, not with 4K, with ray tracing on. So this should be a slam dunk for Nvidia, right? With ray tracing turned on in 1440p, the 7900 XTX beats the 4090. I mean, can someone tell me what's going on here? That's a big problem. That's with ray tracing on. Now in 4K, it's crazy. In 4K, in this example, the 4090 swung way ahead. It was funny, but it lost by 10% in 1440p, even with ray tracing on, telling you a lot, right? That tells you that's a 40% swing. That's the same swing I saw in Rainbow Six Siege. So there's a up to like 40% swing in performance you can get with Nvidia if you don't have the absolute fastest CPU. So yeah, well, again, look for that video dropping Sunday. This is a big problem for Nvidia, and they need to wake the fuck up. They need to wake up, because if they don't wake up, it's going to be a bloodbath next gen. It is. I don't think they can just keep solving this with software, because I think in 2027, when RDNA 5 launches, 240 hertz will be standard, and we'll be beyond Battlefield 6, right? We might be on Battlefield 7, or and that will be in the next gen consoles come out, which will all have Zen 6. You know, games are going to use the CPU even more next gen. Nvidia's got to fix this at a hardware level, or it's going to be a very rude awakening, I think. God, imagine if the 6060 has 8 gigabytes too. Oof. I don't know. Nvidia, you're taking your eye off the ball a bit here. That's all I'm saying here. Techno writes in, by the way, and says, the 9060 XT is already quite bandwidth constrained. Wouldn't GDDR7 alleviate the bandwidth bottleneck? I don't think it's constrained. It seems to perform incredibly well. Also, you would have to be launching a new die. I don't think that's worth it at all. I don't think it's worth it at all. Again, Techno, to make a new die costs millions of dollars in development alone. Then you have to launch it, test it. 15% isn't worth a new die. The 9080 XT, if it comes out, will be more than 15% faster than the 9070 XT. That's why AMD would launch a new die. I don't think people are doing new dies for 10% boosts or something here. And then upping the cost because of that as well. All right. So we have another question here. Oh, yeah, let me put that there. CPU overhead rant for a timestamp. 1690. Okay. Ray Fisher writes in, thank you for the very generous tip. He says, I hope everything you have everything you have from your sources has told you comes to life for AMD GPU, and that it will be on the top. It'll beat the 5090, or it's going to beat the 5090. I guess who knows? Maybe they could cancel it again. But if AMD launches a 154 CU RDNA 5 graphics card with a 3D 4-bit GDDR7 36 gigabit per second bus, it will easily beat the 5090, my dude. Now, the 6090, I don't know. I would need to see 6090 specs. And then he says, thank you for everything you do. Oh, so no question, just a thank you. Yeah, well, hopefully the little insight I gave there was something, but thank you for the tip. Oh, no. This person wrote a question that is not in English. I'll have to translate that. Let's go to Google Translate. No, I do not want to translate Latin. Detect language. All right, so this is in Portuguese. Hello. Obrigado. I used to speak a little Portuguese, and then because my brain's so old, it just went the second I stopped using it. But hopefully I said a correct word there. Probably not. Probably not. Don't hate on me too hard. Okay, so Joa Fontoura writes in from Brazil or Portugal, I assume, and says, hi, Tom. Will Zen 6 desktop use TSMC N2X or N2P? I see a lot of leaks mentioning N2P more than N2X. Both. I have documents showing both. They're going to use both. That's it. I will say, and I'm not hating on you, Joa. I hope I said your name right. Maybe I'll say Fontoura because I think I can say that easier here. But yeah, I mean, I saw some of the I saw a press release, it looked like, from Tech Power Up. I wasn't sure if this was a leak from Tech Power Up themselves, if they were quoting someone, but I didn't see a link to it if they were. There's a lot of people that say things and then don't realize I said that months ago, like early this year, I believe I leaked Zen 6. It uses N2P for server and laptop and N2X for desktop and probably some select high performance laptop chips. Probably some high performance EPIC chips as well, but it's N2P and N2X. There's no gotcha here. It's like that shameless reporting I saw from Hassan at WCCF Tech or the crybaby at Video Cards, who was like, "Oh, Kepler said AT said that RDNA 5 has alpha Trion transformer naming." Yeah, no shit. I leaked that like months ago, dude. Yeah, I know. And these are people that didn't actually watch my video and then are like, did Tom say this? Did Tom not know this because he didn't put it in all caps in the title of his video? So I would recommend to a lot of people. I'm saying this, and I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because I think it's a fact. This channel has never put out better leaks than it has in 2025. From die shots of Xbox Magnus, specs of the PlayStation 6 handheld, full specs and diagrams of Medusa Point and Zen 6 CPUs with the die sizes years before it comes out. Go through the channel if you haven't watched for a while. And from what I can tell, there's a lot of people who took a break from the channel. It seems like the 50 Super leak and the PlayStation leaks are pulling in old fans and new ones that maybe missed a lot of stuff. Go watch my Zen 7, my Zen 6, my PlayStation, my Xbox leaks. There's a lot of stuff you guys have missed because all of this, I keep seeing this thing, this phenomena of like, Tom, did you know this? And I'm like, yes, I said this 5 months ago. So again, not really complaining or bragging, just PSA. There's a lot of details I keep seeing repeated online right now that you could have known a while ago. Um, duh, duh, duh. Let's get to some more questions here. Do we have any other Zen 6 questions? We do not. All right, so let's move on to some Intel questions. Intel. So Naughty DJ Aftershock writes in and says, have you seen Intel's software-defined supercores patent that has been floating around? Yeah, I saw something about it, and I think actually a source at like AMD sent me an Intel thingy. Oh, that's interesting. I have to. I have a Leica source just sent me as well. This is actually interesting. I'll have to write this down. Anyway, but let me get through this first before I get to this upcoming leak here. Someone just sent me at AMD. This is interesting. I want to tell you guys. But let me answer this question. And anyways, though, not a DJ Aftershock. Have I seen software-defined supercores patent that has been floating around at Intel? The answer is, yeah, I saw that. I saw some rentable unit patents floating around. You have to remember, half of the time patents mean absolutely nothing. Like I believe Sony had all these crazy modular controller patents, didn't they? Like just an example that comes to mind a while ago. And they never have used that. They haven't used that yet. I mean, there's a lot of patents that never become anything. And so I don't really know what to say about it besides that. But yeah, look, I don't know. Intel's gonna have to find a solution to something similar to rentable units because without an ace up their sleeve like that in the future, I'm just telling you guys, they are going to get buried by Zen 6, or I should say Zen 7 and Zen 8, which I actually know some information about Zen 8 as well. If all they're going to do is keep bringing like 5 to 15% IPC uplifts and more E-cores, like they're going to need to bring a fundamental uplift soon because AMD is going to do some fundamental changes with Zen 6 and 7 and 8 that Intel's going to have to be able to compete with. So random Intel patents, I don't know, man. I don't really put a lot of value in looking at those that much, to be honest with you. But yes, I'm aware that Intel's patented a bunch of things, and hopefully some of them lead to good stuff. All right. Patents, Arrow Lake, 18A. Chris Rich writes in and says, Meteor Lake was bad, Arrow Lake was bad, and lately you've referred to the next release as Pitiful Lake. No, I've said my sources have been calling Panther Lake Pathetic Lake behind the scenes. So if Intel produces 3 clear duds in a row, but then Nova Lake is amazing, would that be due to sheer luck? A broken clock being right twice a day? Or was it something fundamental that changed within Intel to give us real hope that Nova Lake could buck the trend? So here's what I will say about Nova Lake. Nova Lake was firmly part of the Royal Core thing that Jim Keller was working on. And there were a lot of aspects to the design that weren't rentable units. So that would be the first thing I would say, Chris, is they put a lot of effort into it. Jim Keller had his hand in it. The rentable unit team was working on it, out of Portland. And in Oregon. I mean, in Oregon, I should say, not Portland, in Oregon. And it wasn't just rentable units. So that would be a reason to expect this to be much better. Arrow Lake and Panther Lake were looking to lay the groundwork, but they weren't fundamentally part of Royal Core. So even without rentable units, Arrow Lake is quite a departure to a new architecture. So that'd be one reason to think it's better. Another reason, again, I'm kind of just steel manning the argument for why Nova Lake might be better, is you think eventually they would figure out how to do tiles and not lose performance. Meteor Lake was a bulldozer situation. Arrow Lake has firmly turned out to be like pile driver, like all of this stuff that's supposed to be magical, and it just didn't go anywhere. It didn't get you nearly as much as they thought it would in terms of performance. You would think, though, with Lunar Lake being decently better for what it got, what you spent to make it, and Panther Lake hopefully finding some, better ways of doing things, that by the time you get to Nova Lake, they know how to do things right. So that would be another reason. And then the third reason is they know it has to succeed. I mean, man, they know Nova Lake has to succeed. And so, I mean, actually, on that note, Matthew Cassels writes in and says, because, and he's quoting me here. I said this in the Discord recently, which again, get access to, chat with me in the community of thousands of people if you join the Patreon. Matthew Cassels said, Tom, recently on the Discord, and I'm quoting you, you said, because frankly, if Nova Lake fails, Intel is quite literally cooked. How cooked would Intel be if Nova Lake fails? That's going to take more than the U.S. government buying 10% shares in their company to bail them out. It would, if Nova Lake fails, it's like the worst time to fail. Like, let's look at Arrow Lake, for example. Arrow Lake, I'm telling you guys, don't believe me. If you don't believe me, don't believe me. That's fine. But I'm telling you, they wanted a 25% IPC uplift, at least 20, with Arrow Lake, and they got 9%. They wanted that, and they wanted it to clock faster than it did. And again, anyone who disputes the truth to that, I would just say, come on, guys. They didn't want a 9% IPC increase by going, what, 2 node jumps, 3 node jumps, and they're to 3 nanometer. They went from 10 to 3 nanometer, 10 to 7, 7 to 5, 5 to 3. It's 3 node jumps. They couldn't even increase performance over Raptor Lake. That was not the plan the whole time. They definitely wanted a much higher IPC increase, and it just failed. The Meteor Lake tile system that Arrow Lake inherited sucks, is half of the reason. The other half is, well, let's not relitigate all of it. But luckily for Arrow Lake, it launched next to Zen 5%. So that's the difference with Nova Lake, right? Is not only is it another generation, if it were to fail, where it's like another failure in a row, it would be a failure against Zen 6, which I think is going to be a banger. It's going to be a failure against Zen 6 that's targeting 7 gigahertz or higher clocks, increasing core counts for the first time in 6 years, since 2019 when Zen 2 launched. 24 cores instead of 16. A double-digit IPC increase does seem to be locked in at this point, and like a 20 to 30% clock speed increase, and a new layout for lower latency between the dies with bridge dies. Good Lord, you can't fail now. Arrow Lake fell short 20, 30%, but at least AMD also fell short in a lot of things with Zen 5. And so it turned into a situation where Intel's losing market share, but it could be worse. It could be worse is if Nova Lake doesn't give us at least, I would say, like a 15% IPC increase and a 20% clock increase, along with the BLLC cache being a solid competitor. This isn't going to be Zen 6%. This is going to be Zen 2, Zen 1 to Zen 3 level uplift, probably. And if Arrow Lake only gave you like 50% more multi-threading and 10% more single, it's going to get buried to the point that you would have like the Ultra 9 losing to AMD's like mid-range 12 core at the middle of the stack. It would be Rocket Lake all over again, is what I'm saying. Actually, probably worse than Rocket Lake. So that's how cooked Intel would be, Matthew. I'm just putting things in perspective because you asked. Arrow Lake fell very short, but at least Arrow Lake launched next to Zen 5%, if we're being honest. And I don't think Zen 6 is going to fall short. So yeah. Okay. Jay Buffet writes in and he says, yes, I know I spelled my name wrong. Because, hello, Tom. I saw in the Hot Chips coverage that Intel's new node, I believe it's 18A, is actually getting used for something useful, their server products. Do you know what process of nodes they are planning for upcoming generations beyond Nova Lake? I'm a bit of a fab nerd thanks to Asianometry, so any news in that front would be appreciated. Also, there's been some articles about some type of software-defined supercores. I'll bring this up again for upcoming Intel products. I was wondering if that was BS, considering the death of Royal Core. Maybe they have an alternative. Maybe they're trying to do something else. So that'd be my answer to that. Now, as for the nodes they're using, you'd have to check my videos. I think I said, didn't I? What's coming after Nova Lake? I mean, don't I have? I mean, you can go, guys. I'm gonna. This is gonna become a recurring subject in this video. Google my channel. Look up previous leaks. A lot of times you don't need to ask me. Although, you're a patron, so go ahead. For the. But you could have probably answered this yourself if you literally just go to the Moore's Laws YouTube channel and then search Intel leak, and then you would see, what is it? Moore's Law Griffin Cove. So watch the Griffin Cove leak, which so far has been proven correct by all recent other sources at this point. Just pull it right now. And oh yeah, good old Battle Mage section. Here we go. So what I have, and to be fair, this leak is almost a year old, but what I have is that Panther Lake. Yep, there's Panther Lake. Nova Lake uses 18A and TSMC 2 nanometer. And then I believe I expected Razor Lake to use 14A. I'd have to check my Razor Lake notes, though, as I do actually have some up-to-date ones, so I don't remember. But, yeah, there you go. Or actually, that might be wrong. That might be outdated. Let me pull this up. Give me one sec. I'll do something for you. I'll give you guys a little Easter egg here for the people who've been watching for an hour. Why not? Why not reward you? Okay. Where did I write this down? Sorry, looking through some files here. All right. So, well, did I put it here? I might not be able to find it in enough time to have people not click away. Oh, yeah, that's news. That's old. Yeah, I can't find it. I'd have to go find which file I put it in because I'm not planning to do more Intel leaks for a little bit here. So apologies, ladies and gentlemen, on wasting your time. But I do. Let's see. Let me try one more time. There's Xbox Magnus. I don't know. Just have to wait for those videos. But yeah, I do have a roadmap of Intel and the stuff they've got coming out. And I believe they're planning to use 14A for at least some of it. So to answer your question, they are using new nodes. But they're still planning to use TSMC for a lot of them, based on what I last saw, I believe. Although they want to get off of it as soon as possible. All right. Speaking of nodes, Swiggles writes in and says, hey, Tom, something to point out about your 18A assessment. I don't know that I've really done a full Intel 18A node assessment personally, but he says that remember that when 10 nanometer came out, the first processor was a super low power volume processor. What was it? Cannon Lake? Yeah. I also understand if you want to joke, Google Cannon Lake, everybody. I also understand that the most advanced nodes, such as TSMC's Bleeding Edge, usually use a pipe cleaner for ARM with ARM SoCs. That has been a large component of Apple's early initial buy-in for nodes, as I understand it. Part of them deciding a processor for it feels more like a commitment rather than purely signs of a problem. I can understand if they are committing to failure, though it doesn't make a difference. So I'm not really sure what the question is here. But what I would just say is let's not compare anything to 10 nanometer. I mean, Intel's 10 nanometer was maybe the worst node in node history. I mean, besides, I guess, Samsung 4 nanometer, from what I hear, that was probably worse. But I mean, what do you want me to say? We don't compare things to 10 nanometer because that took several generations to even be fully functional. And that's not how you have a successful company. That's part of the reason Intel fell apart there is that they couldn't get to a reasonably new node. I mean, I'd say, 18A performing better with its first launch of like Panther Lake than Canon like did with 10 nanometers, like saying you ran a race, you won a race against a 102-year-old person. It's like, congratulations, you know, you beat grandma in a race, you beat great grandma in a race, maybe great great grandma. So I wouldn't say that's like a big brag there. In terms of like an assessment of 18A, because I don't really think I've had one, is I do think it depends how you frame it, because if you frame it in the context of Intel's previous issues with nodes, like 14 nanometer and 10 nanometer, you go, oh, 18A, 18A is doing great because it's nowhere near, doing better than those isn't going to cut it. And for the most part, it just doesn't sound like it's as good as TSMC. And again, I think the best answer to like how is 18A doing at Intel is if only their quad cores or whatever are going to use 18A, quad and dual cores are going to use 18A with Nova Lake next year. So a year from now, not even like right now, some pipe cleaner, a year from now after Panther Lake, if they're at least tentatively planning to use that for only budgets, ultra budget stuff, that means it's just not as good as TSMC. Is it 50% yields, 80% yields? I don't know. I'd probably have to call someone who knows, who has connections to the foundry side to know. But I don't think it really matters if we just know that they're not going to use it for their Ultra 9s, Ultra 7s, or seemingly even Ultra 5s. That means it's not good enough. I mean, like let's just use Occam's razor here, All right, so that's Intel questions. What do you have any other tipped ones here? Uh, we do have at least one, but it is about RDNA 5. So let me round out the we'll get to some more GPU stuff, but let me round out a Zen 7 question here, because I actually like this question a lot. I'm sure this is something a lot of you are wondering. Let me write this down. There's the timestamp. Zen 7 versus Zen 6. Oh, and by the way, everybody, click the link in the description and also make sure you hit the like button. There's almost 700 of you watching. Let's get 700 likes, please. Also, share this, and everyone, duplicate the tab that you're watching this in. Pull out your phone, go to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel, and double check that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law, that you are subscribed to it. All right. I mean, that really does help a lot. That when a lot of people subscribe to a channel at once, my videos get recommended more, and that brings in even more people. So please make sure that you like and then check that you're subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead. All right. Here we go here. I guess I'll change the timestamp again since I did some shilling before this for the future watchers. Jesse Jaskowiak writes in and says, how much faster is Zen 7 going to be compared to Zen 6? Do you think it will be another Zen 5 from Zen 4 moment? Just a slight IPC increase? Well, so let's be clear about this. Zen 5 was not a slight IPC increase. Zen 5 was a higher IPC increase than we got with not Zen 2, right? But I believe Zen 4. So Zen 5 had a large IPC increase. It just didn't translate to gaming. So let's get that out of the way. But for a lot of other tasks, especially in multi-threading, despite not increasing cores, despite using the same node, Zen 5% is like a 20-30% uplift and multi-threading in a lot of apps over Zen 4. It's also very snappy, by the way. Let me say that, having someone who's tested on laptops and stuff. But yeah. Anyways, though, so Zen 7, is it going to be like Zen 5? I would say Zen 6 is the bigger one. Zen 6 is going to be like Zen 2, right? Zen 6 isn't the biggest IPC increase, but it's a big clock speed increase. And it's a core count increase. The way I would put Zen 6 is, imagine if Zen 4 offered 24 cores. How big would that feel over Zen 3? You're getting like a double digits IPC increase, like a 20-30% clock speed increase, and then 50% more cores. So that's how big Zen 6 will be. It will be as if Zen 4 got 50% more cores in addition to that 30% performance bump across the board, or even more, like 60% in multi-threading. It was crazy. So that's very big. Well, Zen 7 isn't going to be that big, right? Zen 7 will increase core counts to 32, and it will go to the new TSMC 14A node from the, or is it 14A? Is it 18A? I was saying it's 14A. I bet it's 14A node from TSMC 2 nanometer. So you're getting a much better node, and you are getting more cores, but it's not as much of an increase as Zen 6 is over Zen 5, right? Zen 5 is giving you, what is it? 4 nanometer to 3 nanometer to 2 nanometer to N2X. It's giving you like effectively almost 3 node jumps, and Zen 7 is going to be 1 to 2 node jumps. And I think they're going to be smaller jumps, like relatively speaking. So you're getting a new node, which remember, Zen 5 didn't even really get a new node over Zen 4. So for that reason alone, you should expect it to perform better per core over Zen 6 than what we saw with Zen 5 over Zen 4. And again, it's getting more cores, but not as many more cores as Zen 6 is bringing. Zen 6 from 16 to 24 cores is a 50% core count increase. Zen 7 is going to be a 33%. So that's how I would think of it. Is Zen 7 probably going to be as much of an uplift as Zen 6? No, but it's going to be a bigger deal than Zen 5. I would say I would expect its gaming performance to be at least 10 to 20% higher. And who knows, maybe it's 25. I don't know. You know, subscribe to the channel. There will be Zen 7 leaks soon. But you know, I don't think it's going to be like the possibly 30% that we saw with Zen 4, probably Zen 6 and Zen 3. And then in multi-threading, 33% more cores, faster clocks, and more IPC. Yeah, like it'll probably be like a 50% multi-threading increase, 10 to 20% single threading increase. That's not nothing, you know. That's like Zen 3 levels or more, depending on which metric you're looking at. But it's not going to be like Zen 6, where it's like Zen 2 doubled performance over Zen 1 in a lot of ways. So it's not going to be that. But it's going to be good. Again, the way I would put it is think of Zen 6 as being like the jump from Zen 1 to Zen 3 because you're doing that many nodes. Like it's that much better. Zen 1 all the way to Zen 3. That's what Zen 6 is going to feel like. Massive performance uplift. Zen 6 to Zen 7 is gonna probably be like Zen 3 to Zen 4. Yeah, like Zen 3 to Zen 4. Give or take. Maybe a little less in the single threading, a little more in the multi-threading than what Zen 3 to Zen 4 got you. So that's not nothing. That's gonna be a good uplift. But yeah. And it again, still on AM5 as I leaked and confirmed with Steve, sent him the document as proof. You saw it. If you missed that, it's a pretty fun part of the podcast that just came out. All right, now we have some RDNA questions. Oh yeah, and I got that leak I want to get to here that I was just sent from someone at AMD. I'll probably bring this up again a lot in the future, but let me write this down. Real AMD market share, and then we'll also put RDNA 5 questions. So believe it or not, I actually do have a lot of sources at AMD, Nvidia, and Intel, and they actually are fans sometimes that watch my content. Well, I was just talking about market share. A contact at AMD sent me something. I'm quoting here. This person says that AMD conducts their own internal market share research for how much gaming market share they have. According to AMD's own internal numbers, everybody, RDNA 3 was at 15% market share for gaming, and RDNA 4 has moved it to 22%. So because of that, I'll start quoting that one because I don't know. A big problem is I don't think the Steam hardware survey is good. I think there's problems with the John Petty research data, especially in the past 5 years. And a lot of times people will ask me, well, then what do you use? And I'm like, I don't really trust a whole lot, actually. I just kind of try to gauge it by looking at directionally, where is it going? Like, is AMD selling more than they used to? All right, that means things are going well, but I can't give you an exact number. Apparently, and this person tells me the data is they just messaged me again. They're clearly watching live. That this data is 2 months old. So that means that it's probably even higher now. So according to AMD's own market research data, that they people 6 figures to do this for, if anyone wants to argue with me, and they want to know it's accurate so they know if they're doing well. According to AMD, they had 15% of the dedicated gaming market share with RDNA 3, and with RDNA 4, 2 months ago, they got to 22%, and by now it's probably around 25% or more. So again, like I said, does AMD have most of the market? No, it's not what I'm saying at all. But if we're talking about gaming dedicated graphics cards here, I'm not talking about AI. I'm not talking about, like all this one niche thing that was smuggled into China. Like if we're talking about dedicated gaming graphics cards, Radeon, RX versus GeForce. According to AMD's own numbers, they're probably at about 25% right now. And yeah, I don't know. That would mean that it's not great. Maybe they're at 30 though. Could be at 30%. That would be enough to scare Nvidia though. Nvidia, I think when you have had accurate data, kind of looked like they were at the like 70, well, really 80% or more. And if AMD is getting to 25, 30%, that's a pretty big deal. So now I have an answer, and I want to thank this source directly for sending me this, because now I have an answer I can give people. Is I can say, hey, look, AMD's own internal market data, 15 to 30%. It went from 15 to like 25 to 30% recently. So that's what they believe it's at. And if Nvidia is being aggressive, Nvidia probably has similar numbers. Though I would say to my Nvidia sources, if you're watching, maybe we should talk about this. We should probably schedule a call. All right. Let's see, what else do we have here for tipped questions? We got a few GPU ones. All right. Let's get to RDNA 5 and more AT3 for questions. So WX writes in and says, will flagship RDNA 5 beat Nvidia at local AI? I don't know, because I don't know how good the 6090 is yet, right? I mean, I just have a loose estimate that AMD thinks it's going to be maybe double the performance of the 5090. We'll have to see if that's actually true. But that's what it seems like they think it's going to be. Who knows? Or that could just be a guesstimate. I mean, basically, AMD kind of assumes Nvidia can double performance every few years if they wanted to. So I don't know. But will flagship RDNA 5 beat Nvidia in local AI? I don't know. No idea, man. I haven't seen any internal benchmarks on that. No idea. And even if I did, I wouldn't know where Nvidia's at. What I will say is RDNA 5 looks like it will be way better at AI than RDNA 4. So you can quote me in saying this: RDNA 5 will be better than RDNA 4. Heard it here first. Mookie EX writes in and says, what's the limit on AMD's LPDDR GPUs? I.e., what would prevent an AT0 with 128 to 512 gigabytes of LPDDR memory? So no, AT0 uses GDDR7. So I think that limits it to 128 gigabytes. And then LPDDR6, people can tell me what they think, but tell me, experts in the live stream, like if you're in the Moore's Laws at After video chat channel on the Discord right now, if you're in the live chat right now watching, there's plenty of technically minded people, plenty of people. Clearly, I just got a leak from one who work at these companies. You tell me, what's the capacity? I 384-bit LPDDR6. Based on what I've seen out there, could probably get to like 512 gigabytes, I thought. I don't know. Now, I don't think they'll give that to gamers. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the dedicated graphics card version of AT3, not the version that will be in Medusa Halo, where you would want more bandwidth because it's also powering the cores with the RAM. But if it's just for a graphics card, I kind of think they'll just use LPDDR5X for the desktop variants. And if I was AMD, I would just go bottom up. Like, what do we need to do to humiliate Nvidia? Right. And my thoughts are 24 gigabytes. That's what they would need to do. So I would have a, whatever they call it, I don't know, an RPX, I don't know, Radeon Path Tracing X, 1050 XT for 250 with 16 gigabytes. Remember, this uses much cheaper memory. The die is the same size as a 6500 XT. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny die. Like 100 millimeters squared, or maybe even smaller for the graphics die. So that's what we're talking about for AT4. But because it uses the laptop memory, over a 128-bit bus can give you 16 gigabytes cheaply. So I'd have 250, 16 gigabytes. I'd go to 350 to, or maybe 400, 24 gigabytes with the 10, whatever it is, RPX 1060 XT. And then I would, it has a 192-bit bus with AT2. I would then have the 1070 XT offer 24 gigabytes as well. And then I would go to like whatever, if they have a more cut down version of that AT0 than what they showed at that document I leaked, I would probably go to 32 gigabytes. Would it be 32 or would it be 36? It could be 36 gigabytes. I'd go to 36 gigabytes and then 48 gigabytes. Like, let's do it. Let's humiliate NVIDIA. Let's have a $250 16 gigabyte card, a $400 24 gigabyte card, a $500 24 gigabyte, 600, or probably $550 24 gigabyte, $650 24 gigabyte, and then like $800 or $1,000 36 and whatever it is, I don't know what it will cost, but $2,000 48 gigabyte card. Like, if Nvidia launches even a 12 gigabyte 6060, let's make it look stupid with a 24 gigabyte, you know, 1060 XT. Why not? That's what I think AMD should do. But no, they're not going to like go to 512 gigabytes. I don't think maybe they'll have some special, AI card that has like 256 gigabytes. I could see that, but I don't think any 512 gigabyte cards are coming to like gamer versions of the card. Naughty DJ Aftershock writes in with another tip. Thank you. He says, has there been any rumblings about the future Instincts or CDNA cards? It seems like AMD's holding details about it close to their chest. Wasn't there some? Also, he's calling some people clowns. I don't know. I'm going to stay away from. I don't know why you would be calling them clowns right now, but I don't feel like saying that. But what's going on here? No, I don't know what's going on there. But so I think an MI 500 leaks just came out, didn't they? So I don't know. Nothing much. Just I haven't really followed CDNA that closely recently either. So are there rumblings about what Instinct and CDNA is doing? Yeah, there's a couple people I could probably ask about it, but unless they unprompted send me this information, it's not really something I'm probably going to dig on, especially with how many sources I have now where I can pull information about like Titan Lake over here, Zen 8 over here, PlayStation over there, Xbox, Nintendo. Even I like Switch 2. I find like Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, gaming, Zen APUs, Hammer Lake from Intel. I find all of that much more interesting than CDNA at this point. So I wouldn't say there won't be more, future MI 300, MI 500 leaks, MI 600 leaks like I did MI 300 leaks, but I will say I don't really prioritize that anymore. There's only so much I can do, guys. I mean, and once I have access to pretty much everything, I'm going to prioritize the stuff that I find most interesting or stuff that I think my community will. And I think my community, will find like an RDNA 5 graphics card for gaming leak more interesting than CDNA personally. Someone said, oh no, here we go. Every live stream this happens. Every live stream. I'll be nice though. Luke TV says, Tom, how is the Intel Bartlett Lake topic going? Do you think we'll be able to buy these someday? Who cares about Bartlett Lake? Guys, who cares about Bartlett Lake? It's 10 nanometer. Who cares? By the time it launches, we will be pretty close to Zen 6 and Nova. Like, who cares about 10 nanometer? Like, come on, garbage dump node processors. Come on. Come on. I don't care about Bartlett Lake, guys. It's not 2021 anymore. It's been 4 years since Alder Lake came out. I don't care about the next Alder Lake Plus. Alder Lake Plus, 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 plus. I don't care. You shouldn't care. You should be more interested in Nova Lake. Anyways, though. So yes. And look, like it was a well-meaning person. He just said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Again, I'm not saying you're a bad person or I'm mad. It's just, it's every live stream. I get a couple of questions about Bartlett Lake. And I'm like, guys, the 10 nanometer cope has to stop. We're beyond 10 nanometer. We're beyond it. Are we not beyond it, people? We're talking about 2 nanometer Zen 6. We're done. No one should care about Bartlett Lake. All right, let me see what else we have here. So we have we have a PlayStation question finally. Let me get to that as well. And by the way, if you have any questions, this is probably the last 10 to 15 minutes. So get those questions in now before I sign off. All right, PS6 Handheld. Yeah, I guess I do think that the AT3 and AT4 Medusa leaks are my biggest leaks of the year, but I have to admit my PlayStation ones are pretty big as well. So Bespoke exclamation point writes in and says, have you heard if Sony plans on mandating Canis compatibility? I keep seeing people say that the handheld will hold this gen back, but I think people keep forgetting that the Series S and X and PS5 will continue to be supported for years. Yeah, and potentially devs can also just offer a cloud remote play only handheld version. I don't think they want to do that personally, but when games get more complicated, as long as Sony is upfront with that possibility, I don't see the issue. So I'm not going to say too much about this bespoke exclamation point. Thank you for your support and writing in, because I'm already basically done writing the notes on another PlayStation video, and not even the one about Orion. I've already had enough thoughts, follow-up thoughts, you know, like the leak on PlayStation Canis, that handheld I put out, that was already almost a 30-minute video that had like die shots, die sizes, specs, performance estimates, pricing estimates. It was a, I think it was, I don't think I skipped on that at all. I did not save part of that video to have future DLC, if you will. I didn't cut part of the game for DLC so I can have another video. But enough time has passed where I put more thought into like comments, reactions people had, crunch some numbers on like what the performance of what might be. And I've already got enough for an entire probably 20-minute follow-up video to that one before I even do the Orion leak. So I'm not going to say too much about it now because I want to save it for that video. Um, but what I will say is I do think, and this will be a major focus of the follow-up PS6 handheld video, I do think I need to do that video because people fundamentally don't get why the Series S failed and this might not. I fundamentally think people don't get it. The reason the Series S caused problems for the Series X was twofold, was threefold, actually, I think. And this will be again part of that video I'm talking about, but I'll give a brief overview of the idea. Number one, the Series X had 60% more RAM than the Series S. That's too much. You're not making the same game. And also the bottom one had 10 gigabytes. By the way, the PS4 Pro had 9 gigabytes of RAM total because it had a gigabyte or two, I think, for background tasks, a gigabyte for background tasks or recording. So you're going from 9 to 10 gigabytes. That's not even next gen. That's not a next gen amount of RAM that the Series S had. And that is why it held back the Series X. It wasn't the teraflops. You can just run it at a lower resolution. Who cares? It was the RAM. And so you would assume, we'll see what happens, but you would assume Sony would have noticed that and gone, okay, if we do this, it's not the teraflops. We can make this thing way weaker. The issue is the RAM. That's what held it back. And so I believe the RAM Sony is going to choose for the next gen consoles is going to be 24 or 36 for the handheld and 30 or 40 gigabytes for the home console. Either way, that's not as much of a deal. We're talking about a 30 to like 10% RAM difference. That's enough for the difference to just be resolution and maybe cutting the textures in half. Like that's literally it. Like if you had even if let's say Sony cheaps out 24 gigabytes of RAM for the handheld, then 30 for the console. Like they cheap out and don't give us the 40 and 36 gigabytes I think they should give us to be fully next gen. Even then, you're talking about having like 8 gigabytes of VRAM for the handheld, and then like, I don't know, 22 gigabytes for the not 22, sorry. 12 gigabytes for the game and still 2 gigabytes left over for running a really low level LLM or something for these new AI features. It's enough, where that is going to be fine. And then if you go from 24 to 30 gigabytes in the PS6 home console, it's pretty simple, guys. If you're giving them an extra like 3 or 4 gigabyte, like 6 gigabytes for the textures, that's basically it. And the ray tracing quality, all you would have to do between the handheld and the if you will, the desktop version of PS6 is you could literally take the textures and cut them in half. Just cut the size in half. You're probably good. And then run in 1440p instead of 4K. And I think this is where I get to my second point. Why the Xbox Series S failed. It was too soon, right? It was too soon. Microsoft, I remember in interviews, people on the Xbox team said they thought that we're basically where graphics are going to be, and now it's just going to be about scaling resolutions in the future. And we don't, and that's why they think everything will be compatible with Series S forever. They won't be. They were wrong. But it's because they were a generation too short. Next gen is where we're going to have the capabilities for the consoles to do full path tracing, full AI capabilities. That's, I don't know. If you think the PS4 was supported a long time, which by the way, they're going to kill that thing off next year. Get ready for the PS6 because the PS6 and the Xbox Magnus are actually going to have the building blocks that will be future proofed. It will have path tracing support. It will have next gen AI. And that from there, you can scale, I think, for 10, 20 years. I just don't think RDNA 2 and Zen 2 was enough. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Just because RDNA 2 can do ray tracing doesn't mean it can really do ray tracing. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't enough. And so, and the resolution they were going from as the base also was too little. So, hear what I mean by that too, is I think this is a very important point I'm going to try to get across in the video I'll do. The Series X, if we're being honest, right? Um, or like, actually, why don't I involve you all right now? Everyone watching this in the live chat, maybe in the Moore's Law's Discord, what would you say the resolution is of the Series X, generally speaking? I know there's some games that have 4K support and they're locked in 4K, and I know there's one game that's only 1080p. But let's be honest, what is the Series X really? Because I would say it is an 1800p 60 console that often drops to 1440p. So whether you want to call that 1440p 60 console, 800p, Series X, not S, guys. Well, it seems like I'm only getting sarcastic responses here. Like, it's not 800p and it's not 8K. I can't wait for the next person to just be like, oh, the Series X is 12 teraflops. That makes it 16K, right? That's what Microsoft told me. But PS5 or Series X, by the way. It doesn't need to be the Series X. So if you're a PlayStation fanboy, what do you think the PS5's resolution is? Although some of you are getting to what my point is. Well, they didn't have FSR at launch, guys. So you don't even have to say upscaled. Yeah, so like most people are saying 1200p to 1800p, right? 1440p to 1800p. That's pretty much, I think we all agree there. Like late stage console capitalism. It's like 1440p, right? Like a lot of games are on the PS5 and Series X. Okay. So that's fine. I think 1440p with the FSR 3 turned on, it locked to 60, looks good on the Series X. Looks great. Looks good. Right. But here's the problem. The Series S is a third that performance. So what is a third of 1440p? You're getting into 720p territory here, and it's not enough. That's the problem. It was a generation too soon. Hear me out. If the PS6 does 4K 120, I know it will use FSR 4. Get over it, crybabies. It's 2027. We're using DLSS and we're using FSR 4, and stop complaining that we are doing that. But whatever it is, 4K 120 with decent image quality and ray tracing. What is the difference between Canis, the handheld, and the PS6 desktop console, Orion? The difference is going to be bigger, I think, than the Series S and the Series X in horsepower. Not in RAM, importantly, but horsepower. But here's the thing. A third of 1440p is like what, 900, 720p? It's not 720p because 720p would be a fourth of 1440p. Like you're in like 800p territory, and it's just not enough. It's not enough of a resolution to look good. But here's the funny thing. 4K 120, what's a fourth of that? Still above 1440p 60. Like so I think it was just a generation too soon in the horsepower. Like the handheld can be a fourth as fast as the home console, and going from 4K 120 to 1440p 60, that's actually a bigger jump than a fourth. So it was just too soon. It was too soon. You can't have like an 1800p shaky 60 console and then go to a third that performance with like 60%, like with it and with the big one having 60% more RAM, and expect that to scale, because your max resolution for the strong one was not high enough that going to a third of that looks good, and the RAM is just too little. So that's my explanation for all the people. And I will have a whole video going over this, I believe, before the end of the year. Maybe not for a month or so, though. We'll see. I have a lot of stuff to get to. But like, a thing I want to convey to people is a fourth of 4K 120 is still more than 1440p 60. And I think that's what Sony realizes, is that with the amount of horsepower we're going to have next gen, you can do a quite a bit weaker console and it won't look like shit. The problem with the Series S is it didn't have enough RAM, and the baseline just wasn't good enough because the technology wasn't there yet. On top of that, I think something I'll get to in that video is the ray tracing difference as well. Like the PlayStation handheld might have ray tracing comparable to the PS5 Pro. So it's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to run all of those games. It's just they will run it with like a fifth the pixels, right? Like, because here's a funny thing, people. Let me do this math right now. Did you guys know that 4K is over double the resolution of 1440p. Like, what is that difference? 1920 times divided by, because a lot of people think of 1440p as like half of 4K. It's actually less than half. And 720p is less than half of 1080p. So let's do this. Times 1280. So yeah, it's 2.25 times the resolution. 4K is over double, 2.25 times the resolution, or 2.25 times the pixels that 1440p gets you. All right. So then let's multiply that by 2 again, because I assume the handheld would target 60 and the console might target 120 more often. We're talking about 4.5 times the pixels. 4.5 times the pixels to go from 1440p 60 to 4K 120. You don't need nearly as much horsepower. And I actually know the compute unit difference, which I actually haven't leaked yet. A lot of people have missed the hints I've been dropping, that if they beefed up the handheld with more than 12 compute units, they also probably beefed up the home console. Yeah. So, like, you're looking at something that's, I'm not going to say exactly what it is because I don't want people to know yet, but it's over 3 times the compute units between Orion and Canis. But I assume also Orion will be clocked quite a bit faster. So yeah, I mean, however they decide to do it, they're gonna give you, but it's a the bandwidth difference I don't think is quite as stark though. So depending on how you shake it, they're giving the handheld half the CPU well, not half the CPU performance. I would say 40% less CPU performance, I guess is how I'd probably put it. Yeah. Like maybe 30% less CPU performance, but they don't plan to run it at as high of a frame rate. And they're giving it in terms of compute, probably a fifth, a fourth to a sixth the compute, but it's going to be running like 6 times, 4 to 6 times the lower resolution, lower pixel density, because it's not just the resolution, it's the amount of frames per second. So that is why it can scale. And I hope that makes sense to people. I'll talk about this in more detail soon. I don't think it's going to have any problem scaling. Your direct question, bespoke exclamation point. I do I see that it says, like you must support Canis? I don't know. I basically it says that. And I've even seen some weird speculation online that, oh, well, long term it won't support PS5 games. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. It's going to be able to fully run PS5 games, and I think they will look as good as PS5 games most of the time. It'll run it fine. You just got to understand why the Series S failed. The Series S failed, didn't have enough RAM, and it was a generation too soon. Going to a third of 1800p looks like shit. Going to a fourth, even a fifth of 1080 of 4K 120. I mean, what is that difference? Like, that's easy math, right? Because 4K is 4 times 1080p times 8. 8 times. 8 times the resolution to go from 1080p 60 to 4K 120. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Who knows what they will do? Maybe they'll do 1080p 90, or I don't know. I would suggest they should actually do 1440p 60 or 1080p 120 or something. Or it just depends if they want to have better specs than other handhelds, because undoubtedly other handhelds of the time when this comes out will have 1080p 60, 1440p 120. I'm sorry, 1080p 120, 1440p 120. There'll probably be some $2,000 handheld from GPD that has a 4K 120 screen or something crazy, but I think targeting just 1080p 60, 1440p 60 is going to be more than enough to look super sharp on like a 7-inch screen. And you're going to be running, around 6 to 8, 5, I think 4.5 to 8 times less pixels than the home console. It'll be fine. It's going to scale fine. It's not going to hold it back because it's going to have the same AI capabilities, a similar amount of RAM, same IO controllers, the same backup low power cores for running background tasks. It'll be fine. All right. I think I've talked about that quite long enough, but I that's, clip it, share this, guys. There's a lot of people I think confused about the PS6 and the PS6 handheld. Um, So we got a PlayStation question though. Bog Bupog writes in and says, "Hello, Mr. Toms. In regards to PS6, how well postured is Sony to produce these if war were to break out in the Western Pacific?" Guys, anytime you ask questions about that, I don't know what happens, if Russia nukes someone. I don't think we give a shit about the PS6. That's my answer, dude. What I will say is that I think Sony would make it at Intel, and I think we're gonna start seeing the Nintendo Switch 2 made at Intel for the US market, so, there are things they can do, but which which facility they use for the silicon is gonna be the least of our worries. The least of our worries. You're gonna be worried how much gold you have stored, and if your family members are safe. You're not gonna be like, "Ooh, will this delay the PlayStation?" Let's see, Hollow Knight. Let's see, Silk Song. Maybe let me know in the live chat. Mr. W writes in with a tipped question. Hey Tom, do you think Hollow Knight Silk Song sent a strong message to the gaming industry? What was that message? I haven't paid attention to this game. Whether you're in the Moore's Law Zed Discord or in the live chat, can someone tell me quick what I'm missing about this? Six, like what is there? I mean, I don't even know what to look for. I'd have to just put in this game and look news. Uh yeah, I don't know what you're referencing. Duh, duh, duh. Let's see. They set the price at $20. Is that what it was? $20, everyone freaked out about the price? Uh so has it already launched though? It is not. It is about to launch. It has just launched. It launched yesterday. Okay. Um I mean, let's see what the sales look like, but what I will say is I do think more games should play with pricing better. Um yeah. Like I mean, I don't know what GTA 7 will cost. To be honest, I kind of do think it will just be $70 because they're going to want to make money off of GTA Online. But I think they could get away with $100, certainly 80 or $90 if they wanted to. We'll see. Maybe that's what they'll do. I bet it's $80 on PS6 when they had the PS6 remaster, undoubtedly. $10 to upgrade from PS5 and Xbox or whatever. But just because they cost that much doesn't mean everyone else needs to, right? I think Elden Ring could have been $70 for sure. I mean, God, it could have been 80, but Helldivers was what, $50, wasn't it? Or 40, like, and not every game has to be the same price. Find out the price that will make people say, I have to buy that. Like an impulse buy at a grocery store. They put the gum and the candy and the magazines there, the chapstick in case you need it quickly. You want to price your game where it's an impulse buy, especially if you're an indie dev. So what's the price where people go $10? I'll pay that much for that. $20, I'll pay that much for that. And I think more studios need to get better doing it. So it says Helldivers 2 is $40. That made it an impulse buy. It looked really fun, excellent. It could have been 70. Helldivers 2 could have been $70. But unproven dev, a little buggy for sure because they're a smaller studio. $40 is where they're like, this is an impulse buy. And they make money on the back end with DLC. So, which I bought some of it because I just play the game so much. Yeah. So some devs brought the disparity as the same critique they had with Baldur's Gate 3, saying they are setting too low of a price precedence for such an expected a great game. Screw those people. I don't know. I think I saw all this stuff with Randy Pitchford. I think Borderlands 4 could have been $80. I wouldn't have bitched. Who cares? Right? Like why would I care if it was $80? Like why would I if I get Borderlands 4, and I think I will, it's going to do I'm going to play that a ton, assuming it gets good reviews. But if you don't want it, don't get it. But if a studio can make a profitable game that sells gangbusters because it's only $20, well, good for them as well. I just think there should be more experimentation in pricing. I think some games shouldn't be afraid to charge $80 or $90, and a lot of games shouldn't be charging $70 because they're not worth $70. That's what I think. Allo writes in, thank you for the tip, and says, when do you think the 9070 XT 9070 will go back to the MSRP? Well, guys, depending on what happens with tariffs, maybe never. I find this funny too. I've seen these comments, and I saw Steve from Hardware Unboxed, of course, on the show say, for some reason, things are more expensive in the US. Why do you think things are more expensive in the US, everybody? I think we know. Like, there's a lot of reasons they are. There's a couple, though. I will say RDNA 4 is very popular in the US, so that's part of it. But, I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that will be priced differently. in various countries. Like who knows? Maybe the PS6 will cost less in Europe than it does in America. Unfortunately, that might happen. We'll see. So, yeah, I mean, this whole thing about MSRPs, if the 5070 Super, let me look this up. I have a source that has a document that says the 5070 Super is projected to be 10% faster than the 5070. So if I just go, as always, to God, I'm falling asleep, to Tech Power Up, it says the 9070 is 10% faster than the 5070. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think the 5070 Super 18 gigabyte is going to be a 9070 competitor with a little more RAM. From that perspective, I don't really think the 9070 XT needs a price drop. If anything, if I was AMD, I would just launch a 9075, you know, faster clocked version, like 10% faster. Because if you do that, you're still solid, isn't it? 20% faster than the 5070. And then at least your drivers work, right? And if you unplug the HDMI, your PC doesn't melt down like when you're using Nvidia now. I saw Vex 2 put out a video. It's like FSR 4 looks just as good as DLSS. So I think right now I don't think there's a real price premium with Nvidia anymore. It just, especially with their driver issues. So yeah, I mean, the 9070 XT would still be faster. So, but it would probably push it to MSRP. So that's what I guess what I'm saying. If the 5070 Super 18 gigabyte is as fast as the 9070, if the 9070 XT is only 15% faster, well, Nvidia does still have better brand recognition. Uh, so I think that is what would finally start pushing it towards MSRP more likely. But just keep in mind, it's still selling very well. It's a popular card. Um, RDNA 4 is the worst AMD GPU release. Let me do this here. Let me see this here. Who said that? Like I gotta own the noobs every now and then, everybody. And hopefully this is still true, so I don't look stupid. Let's see. Newegg GPU bestsellers. Let's see. Number one, Radeon. Number two, 9060 XT, 3060, of course, because it is 12 gigabytes. Here you go, Osvi. Here's your worst selling generation in history. Genius. Link right there in the live chat, idiots. 9070 XT number 3 sold out. 9070 XT number 4. 9060 XT number 5. 9060 XT number 6. 9070 XT number 7. Even though it's priced at $800, seventh best selling card on Newegg right now. Then finally we get to the 5070 Ti crashes when you change resolutions edition, the 6600 and the 5070 at the last. See, there it is, 5070 though. 5070s always sell at least okay. 70 always sells at least okay. So there you go. What do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 AMD cards out of 10 are in the top 10 sellers on Newegg. And the best-selling NVIDIA card is 3060. And then you have to go to the number 8 spot for a 5070 Ti. No, RDNA 4 is not selling badly. Follow the data. I know, but someone says he's been trolling all evening. I know, and I'm going to troll the troll. This dumbass can't even look at Newegg sales. And so I don't know who's trolling who at this point. And then, by the way, let's go to number 11. 3060 again. Number 12, 9070. Number 13, 9060 XT. Guys, that's why a Super Series is coming out. Nvidia sees blood in the water and they know there's a problem. That's why. Okay? Don't go to busted surveys, which again, and now polling's all of a sudden accurate. Look at the data yourself. Go to Newegg, go to Amazon, go to Mind Factory sales. Look at AMD's earnings. Revenue for GPU is up more for AMD than Nvidia. That is market share taking. And I would say, by the way, to John Petty Research, AMD's own internal data suggests AMD is at 20 to 25% market share in GPU. Feel free to reverse engineer that, John Petty. It is not 6%. It's not. That is not what Nvidia and AMD's internal data says. So I don't know where those numbers are coming from. I do think they're not correct. What is Amazon? I bet Nvidia is better, relatively speaking, there though, because I bet more enthusiasts go to Newegg and Yeah, so there's more Nvidia. There's AMD is number 4. Wow, 5090 is actually there. So it does depend. You go to Amazon, you see more, but AMD still got some stuff up there. So, again, and so if you average Newegg and Amazon, I would say this supports it. AMD doesn't have most market share, but yeah, look, they're probably above 20%, which Nvidia would not like that. Duh, duh, duh. I wonder if numbers from Nvidia would be given the same weight by Tom. If it came from a source of mine at Nvidia, yeah. I would want it to be internal numbers, though, not in Jensen Wang bragging. Yeah, of course they would be given the same number. Guys, I leaked the Switch too. Like some of my best leaks are Nvidia leaks. My best performing video of this month is a 50 Super leak, where I'm excited about the 5078 GB. These fanboy accusations are ridiculous. I'm using a 4090 right now. Using a 4090 right now. Come on, guys. Spencer Walker 21 writes in and says, my brother wants a PC. He linked to a Costco PC with the 5080 and told him 16 gigabytes wasn't enough for high-end 4K gaming. When do you think the 5080 Super will release? October or November? Well, I think the 5070 Super will launch October or November. I think there's like a 50-50 chance the 5080 Super is held for early next year to get faster memory. So, but yeah, so there's your answer, Spencer Walker 21. Also, he'll be able to get a 5070 Ti Super, I believe, October or November. So, and that will have 24 gigabytes. That'll be $800. That'll be, what would that be in performance? Probably. Where's the 5070 Ti on Tech Power Up? Da-da-da. So the 5080 is 15% faster than the 5070 Ti. So I think the 5070 Ti Super will probably be 5 to 10% weaker than a 5080. 5 to 10%. Would it even be that much weaker? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it would be like 10% weaker than a 5080. But $200, or honestly, 5080s are usually $1,400 right now. So I would wait for I would tell your friend Spencer, thank you for the tip, or your brother, tell them to wait for the 5070 Ti Super. Or just save money and get a 9070 for $700 right now, because 9070 XT. Because you can get, I mean, I think 16 gigabytes is enough for 4K now. I used a 9070 XT. It ran 4K fine. Um, I just wouldn't pay over $1,000 for a card that has only 16 gigabytes. Like I have self-respect. Unlike some Nvidia fanboys who think 6 and 8 GB cards are still okay in laptops. I have self-respect, so I wouldn't pay more than $300 for 8 GB. I wouldn't pay more. I don't think I'd pay more than 350 for 12, honestly. 12 gigabytes pretty low end now too. I wouldn't pay more than like $400 for 16. Like if it has 12 gigabytes, I'm not paying $400 for that. Like I'd want at least 16 above 400. And I would want more than 16 gigabytes above 1,000. Sorry, I'm not paying $1,000 for a 16 gigabyte card, guys. I had a Radeon 7 in 2019 with 16 gigabytes for 700. What is going on? I have self-respect. So, but that's what I'm saying, Spencer Walker. The 5080 is over $1,000. The 9070 XT isn't. So you're not really getting burned for $700. But if you think he needs 24 gigabytes, I would definitely wait for the 5070 Ti Super. I just don't think these VRAM capacity cards that Nvidia has right now are going to age well. They just don't have enough RAM long term for the performance they give you. At least not for the price. Buckpog writes in and says, thank you for your coverage. Well, thank you for supporting me. All right, let's see. Any final questions? Oh, I got one more here from the Patreon that was a pre-submitted question. So I'll give that 5 minutes for you to get any more questions you want, everybody, before I sign off. But I usually don't do 2 hours. Dead Eyes writes in and says, Hardware Unboxed demonstrated that in Battlefield 6, while more cores do help, it's nowhere near linear scaling. Well, of course not. So let me put this here as the final timestamp here. Core scaling. Games tend to load up one of the threads super hard, and then the next 2 to 3 threads very hard, and then the rest of them probably could be half as fast and they wouldn't bottleneck, because the bottleneck will be the main thread. So that would line up with what you're saying, Dead Eyes. It's nowhere near linear scaling. 8 cores are faster than 6, but it's like 10% more. I'm struggling to make sense of why that would be the case, because of what I just said. The game seems to similarly saturate both CPUs, so ostensibly an 8-core should be outputting 33% more work. Logic would dictate that, and the 8-core should be 33%. Right, more cores will help with less dips probably, but in terms of your peak frame rate, it's gonna be hamstrung by the top 4 threads. Oh, in almost any game. And I know I played Battlefield 6 on my, what is it, 7945HX 3D system, my desktop though. So this isn't, it's technically a laptop CPU, but it's running at 100 watts at 5.2 or 4 gigahertz. Yeah, it loaded up all of my cores, at least some. It fully saturated my X3D CCD and then had some other tasks running on the other one at like 80%. So yeah, look, it utilizes 32 threads. There's no doubt about that. But you have to understand that your peak frame rate is going to be hamstrung by the top 4 threads, really the top thread mostly. And so that's why every like 4 cores you add might only add 10% performance, even theoretically, right? And really, it's not past 12 cores that you're really going to get that much more most of the time right now. You'll get a little more. You'll get that 5% boost every 2 cores you add or something in terms of like maybe minimum frame rates and like super hard to run scenarios. But that's only like a bunch of explosions and physics events happen at the same time in Battlefield 6. And so then it loads up the other cores and you actually didn't need them. Like in terms of peak frame rate, you're going to be hamstrung by the top like 4 threads. So that's what that is. All right, let me see. Any final questions here? Just join the Patreon. Fascinating and engaging conversation. Thank you. Remember, everybody, there's now a lower, like $1 tier on the Patreon, which will get access to a couple, like a die shrink a month, the ability to ask us questions. Just $2.56 gets you access to the Discord, questions for guests, and all die shrink telegrams, the ability to, what else does it give you? More die shrinks and other stuff as well. And then the higher tiers, you get to submit a bunch of questions beforehand. And by the way, important one, it's important that you can do that because the people that can ask me questions before I do a live stream, it's not just that they got to ask it for free. It's also that I will see a question and I will go to a source before I record and go, can you answer this? Here's a question about availability about this one thing. I never thought about this, so it is worth it if you do ask a lot of questions here. Let's see. So I see something incorrect here. Diner50 says the PS4 and PS5 all have 8-core CPUs. Even the PS5 needs to use half of its cores for the OS. Gamers truly have been fine. No, that's not true at all. That's wrong. So the PS4 has an 8-core CPU. One of the cores is always disabled, so it's really 7 cores. And I believe one of the cores, or at least half of the cores usage, is dedicated to the OS. And that changed from the launch. I believe when the consoles first came out, they had like 5 or 6 cores that only they could use. And then eventually Sony and also Microsoft, I think, freed up half a core's worth of usage for the OS to be used in the game. And the same with the PS5. I think the PS5 launched with, 8 cores and isn't one of them disabled in the PS5 as well? But also, the PS4 had background tasks, had an ARM CPU for background tasks, and it was even stronger in the PS4 Pro. So I think the PS4 Pro even freed up more CPU resources for the game as well. And then the PS5 has I/O controllers that are the equivalent of like up to I think like 16 or 20 Zen 2 cores. No, I'm not saying that means the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, for example, also has some I/O controllers. I'm not saying they count as a 20 core. I am saying though that like it does genuinely boost its CPU performance in a lot of scenarios by probably 30 or 40%. You can see this in Battlefield 6, where it seems like the PS5, at least, and probably the Series X are performing kind of like Zen 3, And this was, go to NX Gamer's channel. He's proven this in benchmark after benchmark in games where if you have like a Zen 3 CPU, you might get more frame drops in hard to run areas than that same area with a PS5. And that's because the IO controllers are releasing load from the CPU. So that's just wrong, Diner50. The PS5 and the PS4 didn't have 8 cores. The PS4 had a 7-core, but could only really use like 6.5 of them. But it had an ARM core for background tasks. The PS5, I think, can use 7 cores or something, or 6 of them. I think one of them or half of them is freed up for OS as well. So it's more complicated than that. But they're both quite a bit. They're both weaker and stronger than you said they are, Diner. So no, quad cores aren't going to really cut it much longer. Like if you had a quad core that hit 10 gigahertz, sure, but no, it's not the same. All of this is not, and even the PlayStation 6 handheld is going to have 4 cores. But keep in mind what that means. If the PS5 had to dedicate a core to background tasks and disabled a core, then it's almost like the PS5 was like a 6 core, 6.5 core. Well, then that means the Canis handheld with 4 cores is not half as many as the PS5 because the PS5 didn't have access to all 8 cores. And then the PlayStation 6 handheld is also going to have 2 Zen 6 low power cores, each of those stronger than a PS5 core for all of the background tasks you would normally do. So facto, it's actually not as much less as you would think it is. Just saying. So it's more complicated than that. Wix writes in with a super chat. Will the 5090 Super be a thing? I don't think so. No, they have no reason to because AMD is not going to beat the 5090 with anything coming out soon. So they have no reason to release it. Same reason there wasn't a 4090 Super. They would release a Titan or a Super if they really thought they needed to. They just don't think they do. Well, PS6 should be 12 cores. Well, it's not. Neither is Magnus. I'm not going to say what the PS6 core count is, although some of my patrons already know what it is. Join the Patreon. But it's not 12 cores, and Magnus has 11. And I don't know how many might be disabled with Magnus. It wouldn't surprise me if they disabled a core on Magnus or 2 as well. Like maybe they disable one of the big and one of the little cores, and it's really a 9. It was really an 8 core. I don't know, but neither console is going to have 12 cores. So they will both have probably more than 8, though. I'll say that. Someone says, stick to your Sandy Bridge quad core, bro. Everyone has moved on. Yeah, same with Bartlett Lake. We moved on. All right. I'm going to call it on this one here. I think that's done it. We've gone over 2 hours. This is the longest one I've done in months. And so yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Hit the like button, click on the link below to the sponsor for ZipRecruiter to show support, show them that my fans show up when they show up for me. And then also make sure that you I already say hit the like button, probably share this video. There's a lot here. Feel free to share this video. There's leaks about Radeon market share, PlayStation stuff, the 9070 GRE, FSR4 when that comes to RDNA 3. Please share this. It helps a ton. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. When you click away from this video, go to the YouTube channel and make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell button. And please join the Patreon, guys. We just had an hour-and-a-half die shrink come out. It's like a bonus broken silicon going over all the stuff from Hot Chips with Carbon Cry. It's a bonus broken silicon just right there if you join us. And there's a few other from this month as well you can get access to. So, yep, look forward to that. Look for that. Also, look for the next broken silicon. I got more leaks coming in that one. But until then, again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good weekend, everybody.